What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Keeping Karlsson. I'm your host, Louis Ezekiel. Joining me tonight, my pal and yours, Shams Benamor. Shams, how you doing this evening?
Doing okay. Just happy that we have this show to do because there's no games to watch, so might as well be doing something hockey related.
Yeah, absolutely. A day without hockey is a day wasted, but I understand sort of why they set things up this way. Not a lot of places available to host. They want to keep the American players closer to home with American Thanksgiving coming up. So I understand, even if it pains me to not get my gambler's rush here on a Tuesday night. Normally, it's such a busy day. We won't have any updates for you on games as they happen. It's just, not the usual way of doing things, but we're not just sitting around and eating popcorn and watching the game like the first player that we want to talk about here. We're going to dive into all of the news and highlights. And Shams, why don't you start us off telling us about a player who was watching from the sidelines the last time his team played?
And we're talking about Patrik Laine, who got healthy scratched of all things for, I guess, his confidence, or, well, either way, we were referring to a scathing article on The Athletic, which is filled with Laine quotes of just him just basically saying he was surprised and not happy with this. So unless the goal was to make Laine mad, it wasn't the best. But the good thing that Columbus has done is it looks like they might actually have a logical top six. So right now, you could call either one of these the first line, but you have Jenner with Gaudreau and Marchenko, and then Fantilli with Voronkov and Laine. And the nice thing is that Laine is actually playing on the wing as well. So they put him with a good player, Fantilli, and they actually have him at his natural position. So while we can all agree that Columbus has been a mess, and the offense I brought up the last time I was on the show that they'd be afraid of Werenski is just in the pits, is that maybe they might be turning around. And like at this point, if someone dropped him, I would be interested on maybe taking a swing at Laine just to see how things go. Or if I have him, this would be something to keep me interested in him longer.
Yeah, I don't know how many people, I guess I should have checked the percentage owned, but I imagine people are trying to hang in there with Laine if they can. But yeah, absolutely right. As far as the confidence goes, an interesting strategy, and hey, maybe it is the goal to get him angry so that he goes out there and maybe plays his best game to prove everybody wrong, and in doing so, kind of proving the coach right. If we thought the mind games were gone with Babcock being removed before the season, maybe we were mistaken there. But maybe Pascal Vincent is onto something here. I do feel like he's kind of in a bad spot, so I kind of want to give him the benefit of the doubt a little bit, having to step in and take over with all the crap that went on during the late off season. But an interesting strategy, and I'm sure Laine owners are hopeful that it'll work out. If the end result is getting a better line and better supports that he can play his best game, maybe it'll be worth it ultimately in the end. Another guy who is kind of playing his best game and maybe a little bit under the radar, I wanted to bring up Charlie Coyle, and wondering a little bit if we're sleeping on this guy. He's quietly on pace for 70 points. He's still getting the line 2 power play 2 deployment, but in spite of that, he's averaging 18 minutes a game. He doesn't shoot a ton, but in 11 of the 17 games that he's played this season, he has pointed. Guy who got a lot of ads because of Boston's good streaming schedule, but he may be the kind of guy that might warrant sticking around on your roster here, even after this nice week for the Bruins schedule.
And a nice thing is if you look to the week ahead, they do have 4 games with 2 off-night games. I believe it's Monday and Sunday. So even if depends obviously on how he plays this week, but if he keeps it up, he also has a decent schedule next week. So it might be one of those situations where you pick up that streamer. Like, for example, I had JJ Peterka as a streamer earlier in the month or last month, and then he's turned into a regular day starter. This could be a position where Charlie Coyle becomes that. So just think of it a little bit more with your roster planning. You might actually stick around.
Yeah, it's never a bad situation when you've got someone that you can hold on to, and maybe you can sub out someone who's on a cold streak or who, was doing nicely for you but has started to grind to a halt. So yeah, a good option there for you. Another kind of interesting name that's popped up. We've seen a major shakeup in the power play over in Chicago. Who should we be keeping our eye on as the new power play quarterback?
Oh, it is now Kevin Korchinski. So if I remember correctly, he is a top prospect, or at least a high-level one for the Blackhawks. So basically, he has taken over Jones on the top power play. He's played with Bedard, Khrushchev, and Rakell with Perry in the front net. So basically, still the kind of the same idea with the Blackhawks. It's not a host of all-stars you're going with, but when you're with Bedard and on the power play, could be interesting. The thing, though, that I did notice is that I don't know about you, but I think this is going to be a sign for me on my recommendation, is that I took a look at my free agency in Kakuffel. He's a free agent, and I decided not to pick him up. And the thing that scares me is that depends on how you feel about Calen Addison when he was on top power play, say like last year. This guy barely shoots, barely does anything else. This could be a situation where, say even he's on the power play, he gets an assist, he might not even get you 4 cupful points when that assist gives you 3. So that's the kind of the scary thing. He might be in a position to get points, but he has to get a lot of points because he's doing nothing else for you to be worthwhile.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. He's definitely a hit or miss kind of guy. And like you said, that Mendoza line is kind of like 4 points, I think, for a defenseman, or around that area. And yeah, if he's not doing a whole lot, like he does not offer Jones level peripherals. And just like you said, he is on free agency in my Cupful division as well. Keeping Carlson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League. There you go, Bryan. I know you like us to say the whole name in there. Yeah, I didn't grab him either because he does freak me out. He is kind of a, like your Addison type player. So yeah, I think you really nailed it there. I don't need to go any further because my analysis, you covered it all. Let's jump over to the Stars. This has been an interesting one, talking about shakeups, high up in the roster. We definitely saw a little bit of that on Monday, and it might stick for a while because they had quite the successful game, roaring back for a big comeback victory. They had Benn with Hintz and Pavelski up on the first line. The second line remained intact. Duchene, Seguin, Marchment. That second line we've been talking about quite a lot so far in the young season. And Jason Robertson took the demotion down with Wyatt Johnson and Evgeny Dodonov. Now, that's not going to affect the power play deployment for Robertson, but I did notice that the time on ice was pretty close to even between the power plays in that last game. Obviously, the success that second power play unit has been having is giving them a little bit more leash, and they are getting to play out there a little bit more. And that second unit scored the power play goal that they had in the game. So kind of interesting to see. The Hintz line and the Robertson line. So the first and third lines weren't able to crack 50% Corsi 4 percentage. So their shot attempts, they were lagging behind their opponents. But that first line did have 2 even strength goals, with Benn getting one of them. So maybe it does stick together for a bit, especially after that come from behind win. Duchene, I talked about him last week, and I said that he was worthy of a hold, certainly continues to be worthy of a hold. I'm up against him this week, which is not my favorite, but I still like the guy, and I still am in favor of you keeping him. And Seguin and Marchment may also be at least worth a stream when the schedule is good. I think with the success their line is having, they should be held as well. Obviously, not a lot of advice for the J-Rob owners other than you got to hang in there. It is a long season. He did not forget how to play hockey. I think he'll make his way back, but, I think the door is closing on him, being able to reach his total points that he had last season. But hopefully that pace, at least, he can refine his form. Let's jump over now to some injuries and oucheries. Philipp Grubauer took a couple dings during his last game. What's the latest update on this guy?
So what's kind of weird is that he played the first period of the last game, but then didn't come out for the second and had Joey Daccord finish the game. So what the coaches said is that he considers him day to day. We're talking about Grubauer, and then that team did call up Chris Drieger, because if I remember correctly, they do have a back-to-back this week, or I think every team basically this week has a back-to-back. So basically what's going to happen is that even though it's day-to-day, the compressed schedule might mean that he's not going to play another game this week. And while that does sound interesting for Joey Daccord, is that I am kind of hesitant on him on, say, if you're in a categories league, if you take a look at his past starts, other than the very first game he played, he's allowed at least 3 goals in every single game he has started. And that's kind of a scary, and then he hasn't had much wins. So it is something to keep in mind that, usually we hear how a goalie gets injured, rush to pick up the backup. This one kind of depends on your league. If you're looking for volume, you can get 2 starts this week because I don't think they're going to play him on the back-to-back. It could be something that is value, but with the stacked schedule, you might already have 2 goalies playing on the games that he plays. And the fact that he hasn't even been that great, it might not be that shoe-in, hey, goalie injured, pick up the other one.
Yeah, we sort of had, I do think we're going to see a lot more of the regular starters. Monday was a weird one. We ended up with so many backups starting, kind of unexpectedly. I thought that was kind of interesting. If you're thinking about other backups, Alex Lyon, who had a really nice outing against Toronto, although ultimately they lost that game in Stockholm. He apparently is going to start the next game for the Red Wings. So Ville Husso, they're giving him a break to kind of work on his baby brain and give him maybe the Thanksgiving holiday there as well to kind of get his family settled. So that might be an option for you. That's one backup who we know for sure is going to start. But yeah, other than that, I imagine it's going to be pretty chalky in terms of the top goalies getting their starts. Some outjury news. We knew Montour and Ekblad were coming back, but now they have some games under their belt. Just wanted to check in on them. Montour got power play 1 time with OEL while Barkov is on the shelf. My guess would be that OEL loses PP time when Barkov returns, but it is worth watching to see how it goes. I don't necessarily think that Ekman-Larsson is a drop quite yet. But obviously when if he loses that power play time, that would be something to watch for. I believe he had an even strength goal. But yeah, that's just kind of interesting. Ekblad is the only defenseman on that power play 2. Neither of them has a point yet. A Montour secondary assist from Monday was changed. And Ekblad has definitely given the most in terms of peripherals. He's got 9 shots on goal, 3 hits, 5 blocks in 2 games so far. But Montour has just had a ton of power play time, 10 minutes over the 2 games, something like 85% of the power play time with Oliver Ekman-Larsson in the Monday game. So I think that does give him a bit more long-term appeal. He's also playing close to 25 minutes a game, like 24-25 versus Ekblad's 20. But obviously, I think these guys are owned in most leagues, and you're not going to be able to go and grab them, obviously, now that they're back and back early. So just some interesting outjury news there. Another guy is getting close to returning, not going to be ready for Wednesday's game. But Nico Hischier has been in back-to-back practices. So that's another name to keep an eye on. You might want to start thinking about who that lowest person on your roster is, Hischier owners, because you're going to want to drop those guys when you have the chance. And then we got a whole slew of shifts over in Pittsburgh. Shams, tell us about what's going on there.
So the big news that came kind of out of nowhere, to be honest, is that these are the 2 right wings that we've always been wondering about with Pittsburgh, about who was going to get top line or who's going to get top power play. But now it's neither, because Rakell is out with a long-term injury, actually has also been put on long-term IR. So he's out long-term with an upper body injury. And then Rust is still being evaluated with a lower body injury. That one's kind of the question, is that we just know that he's currently injured and being evaluated. We don't know if it's like a day-to-day, like a Grubauer, but at the very least, we don't know. It's most likely not going to be extremely bad, because at least that he hasn't been put on LTIR yet, but we'll have to keep an eye on that. But the thing is that our friend Riley Smith, who some of you may have forgot that because he's just kind of been living on the second line with Malkin, is that he's on Pittsburgh, and he was the one that got the benefit of playing with Power Play 1 with all of the Malkin, Crosby, Gensel forwards. And then that's going to be a really interesting setup, is that if Rust is out for a decent amount of time, Riley Smith could be a interesting pickup. Now, the thing is to also be in mind is that is good for the power play. Something to be concerned about is that they don't have much depth in the forwards, because they were talking about, I think it was like Alex Nylander and Vinny Hinostroza as people that could be potentially going into the top 6 if both of these players are out long term. So probably, unless you're in a deep league, it would be only really Riley Smith that I'd be getting like a bonus. I'm not sure how, unless they start doing something after they get put in the lineup. I'm not rushing for like Nylander and those kind of guys.
Yeah, and it could be the kind of situation where it's a bit of a step back for the rest of the top 6 there, and maybe a bit concerning as well for Jari and Nedeljkovic owners. Obviously, Ned came out and had a great game. Maybe he's just riding high from becoming the only AHL goalie to score 2 goals. And then obviously he got that shutout versus Vegas. So he's been really outstanding lately. But yeah, you worry a little bit about how they're going to be able to hold up defensively. One last kind of minor one. This is probably not a guy who's on a ton of rosters, but Rafael Harvey-Pinard, or right-hand pitcher, as many of us probably think when we see his abbreviation. The lines have been in some flux, but he was seeing a bit of time with Suzuki. The top 6 at practice was Newhook, Suzuki, Gallagher, Caulfield, Dvorak, and Slafkovsky. So 6 to 8 weeks for RHP before he's going to be able to come back. We will not take 6 to 8 weeks, but we do need to take a quick break here. We'll see you on the other side. You're listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. We wanted to jump into some hot and cold streaks for you. We're going to start with the cold so that we can end on a high note. A guy we have been enjoying talking about quite a bit this season because he has been at times extremely hot and other times relegated to the shadow realm. Tell us a bit about our guy, Evan Rodrigues, and the latest in his trials and tribulations.
It pains me to say this, but he's on a cold streak, and to the extent that I think he is droppable in a good amount of leagues, especially, well, be honest, is that like I've already dropped them in the cupful last week for a stream, and I'm not looking to pick him up because while he has no points in the last 4 games, he has 3 shots a game and has gotten hits in the last few as well. The thing that really scares me is that he was already taken off a power play 1, and like I could talk myself as like, okay, maybe he's not on power play 1, he's still on power play 2, but he's on the top line. But now he's not on the top line, he's not on the second line, he's on the third line with Nick Cousins and Kevin Stenlund. And like, even though like Stenlund has been doing stuff, like that is not enough for me to give you a rope. Like if he was with Tkachuk when he was on a few games, that would have been enough of firepower to keep me interested. But with those people and on a cold streak, unless you're on a limited moves and you want to give like the longest leash ever, I think it's a free permission to let go and see what else you can get.
Yeah, it's a guy who, because of his schedule, I've really struggled to be able to let him go. And as good as Kevin Studland was in the last game with a goal and 2 assists, we did not manage to get Rodrigues in on any of that. He almost got one, but I think it bounced off of a stick and went into the goal, like a defenseman's stick that was just on the ice. So the dude is kind of snake bit. He only has 1 goal on his last 25 shots. I want to believe, but I feel like the cold streak is being compounded, obviously, with the demotion. Schedule wise, I haven't been able to ditch him. I got a Sunday game out of him last week. I just am trying to preserve what I can, but one of these days it's finally going to work out schedule wise for me to let him go for someone who's having a little more success. And maybe the guy that I'll hold on to instead, who I picked up, for the stream this week, is Jordan Eberle. He's on a 5-game point streak with 2 goals and 5 assists over that span. He's playing with Beniers and McCann at even strength, which is about as good as it gets over in Seattle. He has been 16 to 18 minutes most of his games, which is quite a lot, I would say, for, your average Seattle forward. Obviously things are split pretty good. I believe I posted on Twitter an observation that they had perfectly split the power play units with 2 minutes and 9 seconds each the game before last, which was pretty impressive. So, we don't expect these guys to be, really anything more than 55 to 60 point players until they kind of prove us otherwise. But I do think Eberle has a good spot. Tomorrow's game, Wednesday's game, I should say, is up against San Jose. Obviously, that's always a pretty valuable opportunity. You never know when they might allow, 8, 9, 10 goals potentially. So the Canucks weren't able to sting Blackwood the way that they have some of the in some of the other games, but it could be an opportunity certainly for a guy like Eberle. So if he's hanging around, he's had 17 or 18 minutes in several of the most recent games, is getting power play 1-ish time, and could be a good option for you as a guy on a hot streak.
So the big thing with Eberle too is we've been kind of talking about the power play here, but only one of those 7 points that he got was actually on the power play. So the nice thing is that he is playing with, even though it's a stew of players, we could probably say that Beniers and McCann are probably the two biggest names on the offensive side. So he's getting played with the biggest names on the offensive side. So he's going to be put into those priority spots. So this is one of those situations where he is on a hot streak and he's put in a position to continue that. So as long as he's with that line, even if, say, there's 2 games that he doesn't get a point, I would be still interested with him as long as he sticks on that line.
Yeah, kind of like the anti-Erod in that regard. Next up is a guy that I am very excited to be talking about positively, maybe for the first time this season. Lay it on us, Shams. Who do we finally have some good news for here on Tuesday evening?
The contract's validated. We can all go for the parade. Huberdeau is on a hot streak. 5 points in the last 3 games. Now, the interesting thing is that we're talking about, hey, put him with Lindholm, put him with Kadri. But funnily enough, he's actually getting these points with Mikael Backlund and Blake Coleman. And on top of that, if you look at the last 3 games, that line has actually had the most ice time. And I wouldn't say that Huberdeau has the most ice time. It's just that line has been working the most, that they've actually haven't put it into a blender yet. So that is something to keep in mind. Now, the scary thing is that line did allow 2 goals on even strength last game, even though they were able to have a good history prior. So you might want to keep an eye on the lineups in practice the next time they practice. They haven't practiced since this game, so we don't know that. But if they keep together, they have showed some history. I'm going to take anything at this point, so hopefully this sticks around and then we can see how it goes.
Well, and, like you said, if they do blend the lines, there's a decent chance that he ends up with a Lindholm maybe, So, it may not be the worst outcome, even if they do get put into the blender, at least in terms of, eye test quality or name quality that you're hoping to see. And of course, all it took was me to be up against the Huberdeau owner this week. And I think that has certainly helped as he went ahead and got another goal there on Monday. So, folks, that's all it takes to have a player go on a hot streak here. All right, one more hot streak to talk about. Rasmus Andersson. 7 points in his last 9 games since returning from suspension. I don't think he enjoyed having to spend those 4 games out. Also, along that time, he's averaging 2.6 shots and 2.2 blocks during those 9 games. Bouncing around a little bit on the power play units, although I think that maybe things are going to start to settle down there a little bit. We saw a little bit of a shakeup yesterday, but by the end of the game, it was kind of business as usual with Andersson. So he has just been playing lights out since returning from the suspension, obviously. Hopefully you held on to him through that period and got him back in your lineup because it is paying off. Always nice to have that guy. And I got a soft spot for Rasmus Andersson. He carried me through some hard times during some other seasons, so nice to see him up there. And with that, Shams, I believe we have reached the end of our show here. So a nice short shift here to send you off into the American Thanksgiving break. Obviously, our Canadian friends have already celebrated, but we give thanks to everybody who is tuning in here, we will not have a show on Thursday, so we'll be back in about a week. If you are a Cupful patron, there will also be a patron cast available to you shortly, so plenty to tide you over during this time off. Shams, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for listening. And then even though we don't have a show on Thursday, we'll be around on the Discord. So if you're a patron, happy to answer any questions on our channel in the Discord.
Absolutely. And you can tweet at us at ShortShiftsKK. Bryan and Elon can be found at Keeping Karlsson. If you would prefer to avoid the Twitter machine altogether, check out GameDayTweets.com. You can get all the best information without having to slog through. You get team by team and searchable tweets by player name. I use it for prep all the time. It's so handy to have available. If you combine the up-to-date lineups and goalie announcements of Game Day tweets with Frozen Tools and their last game lines and all that sort of stuff, you're going to be in good shape to dominate your pool, I think. Please visit Game Day Tweets, visit Frozen Tools, Yahoo, ShiftChart.com, Icy Data, Natural Stat Trick, all the places that we go to research our episodes. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. John Reed is our digital media producer, and until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.